Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for a Q&A. I asked you guys for questions about Chelsea on my YouTube community page and also my Twitter account. I'm going to go through several in today's show. Apologies for not getting around to all of them. I do want to say a thank you before we get going, just on some of the kind comments I've seen not only on Twitter but also on the comments of recent videos. Happy that I'm making videos again, so very humbling. Thank you for your support. But let's get into the questions because we do have quite a few to get through today. Starting off from Twitter, from Hubax, who asks, who's your ideal midfield purchase this summer? Rice, Tchouaméni, or another? Obviously, we've got to start with a Rice or Tchouaméni question because they are two of the big targets alongside Jules Koundé. It's a difficult one because I like Tchouaméni, I really do. But I think Declan Rice, if you miss out on him, I think it'd be a massive, massive blow this summer. Especially because, you know, if all things are even, the likelihood is if Rice has Man United, Man City and Chelsea, there's a high chance he picks Chelsea. And I think he's worth the money. Technically, he's incredible in central midfield. He has developed this season even greater than where he was. You know, he's moved on to another level. I think all the doubts people had about him, maybe even last season, I think he's shown how versatile and also just unique a midfielder he is, how dominant he is for that team at West Ham, where he's an inspirational figure. He isn't just a holding midfielder. He can do that role. He can intercept. He can be aggressive. He can very much cover a lot of ground if you want him to, but he also can charge forward. He's added that sort of attacking element to his game, more of a number 8, which for the type of players I want to see Chelsea buy, in terms of being flexible, in terms of being multifaceted, where a coach at Chelsea can do different things with these players. Rice is just perfect, and there's the intangible elements too. His sense of leadership, his bravery on the ball. There's a sense that he could very much help form a new spine at Chelsea that can keep consistency, that can add that seniority in the squad, and just those level of standards that I think you need in a midfield. And that dominance and that physicality that Chelsea, I think, have lacked, especially in league football. Maybe in European football, Chelsea have excelled. But in the Premier League, you do need a certain type of midfielder to win the league. And I think Rice absolutely fits the bill. And I think missing out on him would be a massive, massive blow. Even though, let's just sign both, Tchouaméni and Rice. But if you had to push me on one, I'm going to say Declan Rice. I think he'd be a perfect signing. Trent Brown asks, with Werner, Pulisic and Ziyech potentially leaving in the summer, what does this mean for the likes of Harvey Vale and Tino Anjorin? I'm not sure it changes much for them because if you've seen the reports from The Athletic, Simon Johnson, Harvey Vale, his contract situation isn't sorted at the moment, although I think Simon Johnson very recently, I was speaking to him on a Twitter Spaces recently, he's a little bit more positive, but there is kind of that fear that we could see another youth exodus this summer. I think the problem for both Vale, who hasn't been on a loan yet, and also Tino Anjorin, who's just gone out on loan this season to Lokomotiv Moscow in the first part of the season, and now he's on loan at Huddersfield with Levi Colwell. They maybe aren't at the same level as, say, Conor Gallagher and Amanda Brozier, who are like the two players I could see taking those roles, and that's accounting for a lot of these attackers currently leaving. I mean, you're accounting for the fact that Werner, Pulisic and Ziyech are all going to leave, or at least two of them will, to open up that space. So I'm doubtful. I think that last summer was a massive moment because I think it opened up a possibility for some of these players to get more opportunities elsewhere, and I think that's a trend you have to be wary of. And we could see no longer the loan army. We're going to see the buyback army at Chelsea from Marina Granovskaya. So I have to wait and see on this one. I'm not entirely sure those two players will still be at Chelsea even by the end of the summer transfer window. Ahmed asks, can we say that the past 2 months of indifferent results suggest Tuchel will have a more stable support from the board so long as he maintains this cooperative spirit on transfers? I'm naturally pessimistic, but I've understood the lack of hysteria from the media during our annual December collapse as a positive indicator. You have to, I don't think you're being pessimistic, to be honest. I think you're being realistic. You are looking at the way Chelsea operate, the actions they take, rather than the words maybe that are briefed to the media about 3-year projects. You see, Frank Lampard was heavily backed in the summer of 2020, and then 5 months later he sacked after a month of bad form. That could very well happen with Thomas Tuchel. There is no reason to buy into the long-term project, even though we all want to see it happen, until there is proof of it. So I don't think you're being overly pessimistic on that. I do think the way he's handled this winter slump, that I would call it, we're getting close to the end of winter, and I think he's handled it amazingly well. There was a period during December where it felt like it started to go wrong. There were some down moments, there were some performances that I was really disappointed with, but there are mitigating circumstances which have made analysis of this season a little bit frustrating. The injury to Ben Chilwell, the COVID situation, maybe the lack of transfers again in key areas where you're kind of looking at it and going, you know, if we have a central midfielder in this position, does Chelsea's season look a little bit different over winter? But I don't think I put that at Tuchel. I think the way recently he's kind of shifted the team to a 4-back system that seemed to have got some good performances again and really re-energized the team. But then, you know, you've got other factors like the Lukaku interview, which didn't help Tuchel during that difficult run. It really didn't. It piled under pressure. But then the way Tuchel came out of that, it was actually a horrible incident, which, you know, sprung up so much controversy. But then Tuchel actually turned it into a positive. It turned it into something that where Tuchel gained more support and more control, or at least the perception of control. We have to be cautious. We have to wait and see what happens. I think it's a lot more about what goes on above Tuchel and kind of the direction of the club and sort of the synergy and the alignment of ideas, buying players in the market that actually suit what Tuchel wants to do and actually make sense, but also selling players that we've needed to let go for a while. So we'll wait and see. I think you just got to be optimistic that at the very least for the rest of the season and what Tuchel's done already, he can do incredible things at Chelsea. So just have to wait and see, which is something I say very regularly when I'm answering questions, but specifically on the case of long-term planning at Chelsea, I think you do have to be realistic and yeah, a little bit cynical about that. Chuck Meat asks, who do you think has been the player of the season so far? Says a lot that I'm instantly thinking about defensive players. It's between two for me. Thiago Silva and Antonio Rudiger. I think Antonio Rudiger has obviously just kicked on from where he was last season under Tuchel, and he's been so dominant. He's got to a position where earlier in the season I was like, you know, Christensen as the younger defender, I want to keep him around. And, you know, Rudiger, his age, you know, is he going to drop form? But the way he's just led this team at times, it's very hard to replace that in the market. You know, are you going to buy someone of Rudiger's current form and quality in the market? And also, how much are you going to have to pay if you do lose Rudiger? But that still hasn't been sorted, so we may still lose Rudiger. But I think he's been incredible. And I think Thiago Silva has just been masterful. Maybe I out to Thiago Silva because I don't think any of us expected him to still be at this level, playing so many games at such a high level at his age. It's ridiculous. He's a master. It's such a blessing to be able to watch him live as well. We saw how brilliant he was last season, you know, behind closed doors, but actually seeing him live, the way he orchestrates things, the way he just calmly goes about his business, you know, the mind is such a big thing in football, and that mentality side of things, and just being quicker than everyone else. It's very much like having JT back, you know, in Chelsea's defence, and Thiago is a European legend, and it's great to know at least he's going to be here for the next year. So I think between those two, I think is kind of the general vibe I've got, because the shame of it is Chilwell and James were absolutely flying, and then they got injured, so it's tough to put them. Obviously their seasons got halted, so between those two for me at the moment. And a final question from Jordan Reed. A lot of people see Timo Werner leaving in the summer, and as a fan who followed him here, I feel like he will flourish away from Chelsea. Do you think he'll be another player who makes Chelsea look stupid for letting them go? Maybe there's a lot of players. I mean, I think Tammy Abraham's kind of doing that at the moment, and that's not breaking news, is it? That wouldn't be anything new for Chelsea fans to experience. In the case of Timo, I don't feel that Chelsea should feel massively regretful if we let him go, and most likely he goes back to the Bundesliga and he starts smashing in 20 or 30 goals a season again. I'm not going to be crying my eyes out about it, because Werner's skills have not transferred well at all to the Premier League. I think the Bundesliga is the perfect league for his skill set. It really is. Transition football, counter-attacking football, where he has lots of space to run into, the sort of space that he just doesn't get at Chelsea and has never got. And technically, his limitations, I just think, are becoming clearer by the week. Just things like the first touch, to be the ability, limitations that for a player of the amount of money we paid for him, and the part of, you know, 25, 26, you know, the area of the career, part of his career he's at now, where it's astonishing that he has these limitations and has got to this level, to be honest, because the lack of first touch, the decision making, the finishing that has abandoned him at Chelsea, the amount of times he's offside for someone who has got the speed he has, the inability when he's confronted with a defender in front of him to be able to, you know, even just knock the ball past them and run past them is just incredible. Even League One defenders, we saw it at the weekend. You know, there was a moment where he was out wide and he was trying to take one of their defenders on, and he just ran the ball out of play. And as much as people want to support Timo, I just think that we have to be honest here. His goal return, because if you look at, say, his dribbling not being that great, his first touch not being that great, his decision making not being incredible, and other, his physicality, he's easily bossed off the ball. What was it that Chelsea bought him for? We didn't buy him to work hard. We bought him to score goals, and his goal returns, hasn't been good at all. When I compare him to, say, Alvaro Morata, I think now Werner has now tied Morata's overall appearances for Chelsea, and Morata had more goals. I think in sort of 71, 72 appearances, Morata had 24 goals for Chelsea. Werner has 18. He scored 1 Premier League goal this season, so now he's in danger of not even reaching the 6 that he reached last year. And Tuchel hasn't been using him a lot this season, even when he returned from injury. And I do believe that says a lot. For all the confusion and doubt we've had about this attack, I think it says quite a bit that Werner hasn't really featured into Tuchel changing things around. Tuchel went for a two-man sort of attack, and Werner and Lukaku played together. That was kind of a combination people were excited to see. But Werner has struggled to get back into this team, and I just don't see how it radically improves at this point. I wish I could be proven wrong, but I think the limitations within his game are just too great to overcome. And it's very difficult to see how, especially with other attackers we have, and looking at, say, Armando Broja nearly reaching Timo Werner's entire Premier League goal record, despite the fact this is Broja's first season in the Premier League as a 20-year-old striker. It's worrying and it's concerning, and I think it's probably better to cut ties, and I think there will be buyers in the Bundesliga, hopefully, who will see Werner's goal return in that league and how different a league it is to the Premier League, and see it as the perfect opportunity to reignite his career, because I just don't think it's worked at Chelsea, and I just highly doubt it will again. And it's just been astonishing just how poor he's been at times, and I just he seems like a nice guy. I think he's a good person to have in the dressing room. Nothing, it's not a personal thing with Werner. I have to analyse performance, and I just, given the way we were all excited when we signed him in the summer of 2020, he just has not lived up to expectation. And I just think, you look at Tammy Abraham, who was castigated last year for some of his flaws as a developing striker. Werner is nowhere near it. Sort of, for me, like, you can talk about the Bundesliga, but you can talk about Tammy Abraham at Chelsea compared to Timo Werner at Chelsea. And Tammy's up here and Timo's like here. To me, they're incomparable in terms of the striker I'd want to play for Chelsea. And I think it's probably better to cut ties with Werner personally this summer, unfortunately. So we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully he proves me wrong, but I highly doubt it at this point, given I think the flaws we can all see at this point from his game. But that is it for today's Q&A. Thank you guys so much for your questions. Great to dive into them again. Leave me your comments, your thoughts on everything we discussed today. We'll be back for the Club World Cup review, the semi-final. Hopefully Chelsea can put in a much better performance than they did against Plymouth. Hope you have a great rest of your days. Thank you for watching. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea. Subscribe to Son of Chelsea, and I'll see you again very, very soon.